Someone to pray for us?
Father, we are so thankful to get to gather again with one another. I pray that our time would be led by you and be honoring to you as we are continuing through this new season of life. I pray for your guidance and your peace through it. Father, I am so blessed by what you are doing in your people. I pray for our conversation today and after this as well. I thank you for your continuous grace for us, Lord, and your patience. I pray that we too could learn how to have that patience and grace with one another. Amen.
Amen. It's good to have you, Niles.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask for you to explain a little bit more about what made you interested in participating.
Yeah, I wanted to. Isaac and I were talking about this in the car, and he said something. I just thought it was weird. I wanted to start building relationships like that are not familiar. If that makes sense. And also, I was very curious what you guys did in this time, and I know it was helping a lot of people, and I want that as well.
I didn't know it was helping a lot of people.
I've heard at least.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what we originally set out to do was it is meant to be something that we are taking initiative in as apart from, well, not like apart from, but at least distinct from anything overseen by or led by or initiated by any of like the adults or parents.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like even in that, the goal is not to try to do things separately from them, but more so to again, I think one of the key words is initiative. So take initiative ourselves, and there's a lot that I think can be expressed in a way that isn't, for some reason, possible when there are other like elders or adults present, not because of any kind of sense of shame or any sort of negative reason. It's just an interesting generational dynamic. I don't necessarily know how it works, but I think part of it has to do with the way our hearts are postured before people that are overseers and elders in our lives, and it kind of being one of respect towards them. So we, by default, without even thinking about it, allow them to be the ones that will lead and even kind of dictate conversation. But when they're not around, again, never for any negative reason, we're the ones that have to do that. So, and I can also say that this time was actually encouraged by my dad and some others, in the same way that the Young Brothers meeting actually had originally been encouraged by Emmanuel to myself. That one's even kind of funny because that meeting, I don't know if you guys know, that meeting started with Emmanuel saying I should spend more time with Benji. And then it very quickly went from there to including Isaac and Elijah, and then later on Jaden. So yeah, it's right along with what you are desiring out of it, Niles, which is to build relationships, even more unfamiliar relationships. So I'd also started this time, like one of our first meetings, saying that it can be a time, I think it has in some ways been a time of review, of like taking a more general assessment of how things are going in our community, so among one another here, but also in our own families, and not even necessarily from some kind of oversight sort of way, but just bringing certain things to the table, to the forefront for discussion and even insight from one another. So not to try to make it seem like some spiritual business meeting necessarily, but like just a way to depart a little bit from our usual casual way of interacting with one another. That's kind of the big part of this meeting too, is that all these people here, when we're together in most environments, it's in kind of like a casual way. Now this is not super formal, but it is slightly more formal, and it's intentionally so, simply so that we have like a kind of a more focused objective when we're talking together. So that still includes bringing up things that we often would in any other more formal or spiritual time, which include like things that you've noticed the Lord doing in your life. And very often, I think for many of us, that's not just like super individual things, but things that have come as a result of things we've experienced with other people. So what do you guys think about taking a break, if I can put it that way, from our worship nights, as was communicated yesterday?
I was actually about to mention that if you didn't.
Yeah, what do you?
What's
your take on that?
First of all, what I found fascinating was the order in which things kind of, at least in our own house, that things took place with like even leading up to worship night, where it was looking like most of us weren't even going to go. I was sick, and I always feel guilty bringing that into any sort of closed environment, and so I was going to say, oh, I'll just pass out on this one. And it was sounding like, for various reasons, multiple members of my family weren't going to go either. And then that text was sent by your dad, and I was having a conversation with my mom about it, and she was saying that it very much looks like the Lord is trying to wake us up, that something there is not right. And I can feel that both when we are in those times and in the half of the day leading up to it. And I just find that very interesting, that with few exceptions, I think there are some worship nights that were actually quite substantial and that I was grateful for, but I do not think that those were an indicator of some sort of success on our part, but the Lord using that time for something, because it's a time we've allowed into. But I don't know. My personal opinion on it is that, and I think you and my mom were having a conversation in the Chipotle line that one night that was a big encouragement for me, just because it was a lot of things that I was thinking and that I didn't know if it was wrong of me to think per se. But I am not sure how beneficial something like that being scheduled the way that we have it scheduled, I don't know how beneficial that is.
Mm.
I have noticed, and I would love to hear y'all's input, but that very often with those worship nights, it is not the, there will very often be signs throughout the day that, oh, there might be something going on tonight that should inspire us to get together, rather than it's just every single Wednesday no matter what. I mean, I even think of that one time, I won't say you started it, but I would say you were definitely in the spirit that one Wednesday. You know what I'm talking about. And I mean, from what I heard from you, there were signs leading up all to the point of that day. And I don't think you were alone in that. And I even think that there might be a room for growth in not only hearing those things, but communicating with one another as inspiration for whether we should get together. And so that it's not necessarily, I think you had said that it might not even be like, meet every Wednesday or every other Wednesday, whatever it may be. But setting aside that time intentionally to allow the Lord to do something if he so pleases, but not presuming that simply because we have a scheduled time and we're getting together that he does want to do something with that, especially in the way in which we are meeting together. Because I think that the atmosphere that I'd say we've all contributed to in little ways, but the atmosphere that is created there more often than not is stifling rather than inspiring. And I, for a while, have been not seeing great benefits from that. I think it's in all of our hearts to try to make the most of it because of our honor and commitment, not only towards each other, but towards the Lord. But I think that he is trying to show us something different there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider even like the progression of the time, even thinking about when it first started at the Lowe's house, which I don't know, you probably
I actually did get to go to one of
One of them?
those, and
Okay.
it was such a funny memory because I remember this was before I was in our community at all.
Mhm.
I was just in a really bad spot. I think that day in particular, especially, and I was like, I should probably get out of the house because if everybody leaves, I don't know if this is going to be a great combination of things for me to be alone in the house. And so I decided to go on a whim. And I remember, like, even though it was, I'm not a huge fan of worship songs, even now it's still something I struggle with. But anyways, like, just being around people was enough, even if the songs kind of bugged me then. But I just remember, like, out of nowhere, like, people just started crying and stuff. I think it was, Emmanuel was still around then, and I think it was, yeah, just like, I had never seen something like that before. And so I just remember being like, what's going on? But looking back on it, I don't know if it was just because of Emmanuel or just because things
Emmanuel
were...
actually wasn't there.
I don't think he was there.
It was my dad that started.
Oh,
that,
was it?
that particular evening, I remember.
Oh, that's right. I don't know if he was...
Emmanuel and John weren't actually present.
That's right. No, because it was, that's right. I think I remember it being, or at least it's starting with your dad and Naomi, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I'm not quite sure what contributed to the atmosphere of that evening. I just remember it definitely feeling different and being much different from the normal Wednesday nights. And that was the only one I
It
got to
definitely was,
experience.
yeah.
I wonder, I honestly don't know how much, like, human, like, the way our brains work play into, like, the atmosphere, the spiritual atmosphere we create. I honestly don't know how much that relationship is intertwined, but I do know that there is a level of familiarity with coming to the same building at the same time, with the same people, with the same music, with the same position of chairs that everybody sits in, that I think definitely creates this habitual mode where it is a literally going through the motions. And again, I just know, like, for me, and I can recognize that in my own brain, like, I can see how, like, not changing things or things not being different at all contributes to that. But even simultaneously, I think that one time we did it over at your house. I wasn't there for most of that meeting, but my dad had said it, other than when Hannah spoke up at the very end, it didn't feel all that different. So I'm not sure how much, like, we can even factor in, like, just the physical place that we're meeting or anything like that. I think it's something beyond just the fact that we're doing it at the Lowe's house versus here versus Whiskey.
Yeah.
Sorry, Benji, I feel like I interrupted you.
I was just feeling like for this worship time, I think it was like reflecting back on all the times we've been able to spend together, and even the ones that we have felt like a really stifling silence, you know, and not been able to speak up or been able to engage. I know that I have learned a lot through those times, and there's even been a lot of conversation around those times, in the midst of those times being kind of a weird thing for us. And I guess just kind of seeing all the different ways that it changed, and some nights that obviously were very powerful, I guess, in the spirit. And just kind of, you know, seeking the Lord and feeling like maybe, obviously that wasn't a bad thing, and all those times were needed, but maybe there is something different, you know, for a different season. Like it wasn't bad for the season that we were in as a people, but there's something different.
I love Sam Solin's interpretation
The
on
dead works.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly
that's what I was
that.
thinking.
Yep, where it's not a bad thing that we're turning away from. It's just a new thing that we are turning
It's
towards.
supposed to build on top of the old.
Exactly.
What we
Yeah.
have learned.
100% agree. Yeah, I really like that.
That's what I was gonna mention, is that there may have been a season for that time, just pretty much what yes, you're saying.
I think it. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just remember we've had a lot of conversations about it, and I've talked to Dad about it too, and it was, I remember it used to be talked about, and it was a struggle with that familiarity, because we always have the choice of what kind of heart and mind we're gonna bring to something. I used to wonder why, when Emmanuel was around, why many times he didn't come to that time. So there was something always interesting about it, and I found when there was a certain allowance or move in the spirit of some, that things kind of moved for everyone else. Like it took the kind of the initiation of one to start something for everyone. But yeah, that's what I was going to mention though, was that there may be a season and time for certain things, and it's some things just don't happen in the same way forever, and that's not a bad thing at all. Like Benji said, there may be something new built from it or on top of it, but I like was already mentioned as well, there was that kind of sense of something being forced, like something, like some expectance, either someone expecting someone else to do something, or someone having to expect something to happen, even within themselves. And I don't know, that doesn't seem like the right way to go about spiritual things, because it's not something we control. It is something we can give way to, but yeah.
I'm actually very happy you mentioned Emmanuel not showing up several times, because that actually confirms something I have been pondering about recently. When we were doing our feasts at the ranch house, there were, I guess you could call it breakout groups, almost every night we met there. It was always, there were some repeat people, I think I was there most times, but there was always a different group of individuals that would be there and that would have a very, I would describe as a spiritual time. I'm not super in tune with that realm yet, but I just from what I could visually see and what I heard from others, it seemed very impactful. And I think that there is a certain, I was talking with my mom on it, and I think there is a merit of the Lord only wanting certain people present for certain times, and not because anybody is doing anything wrong or for any like personal reason, other than I think that there and I think my mom even mentioned instances in the Bible in which it was very much the case, where certain people should only be present for certain things. And so I think that what you were saying with Emmanuel actually indicates a spiritual sense that I think might be beneficial for us, and that I think many of us might have more than we think we do. I would say a unfortunate byproduct of worship feeling like this bi-weekly mandatory thing, even though it's not mandatory, and everybody says that, right? It still feels very much like, well, why would I not go, right? And I think the issue with that, and this is what I was even coming back to last Wednesday, many people in my house had this feeling for one reason or another that maybe we shouldn't go to worship this Wednesday. And then it ended up being canceled entirely. And I think probably because similar feelings were proliferating in several other people. And I think that there might be some merit and an actual spiritual sense that I think many of us have, but that we often either confuse with our own desire to not go, or just play it off entirely, of whether or not a certain what certain people should be gathering at certain times. I'm not describing this well, but I remember a conversation we were having about worship Wednesdays was literally like, set the time aside, wait to see, be waiting the whole day, and wait to see what people the Lord is pressing something on, right? And even, you know, if the Lord didn't press something on you in particular, but someone else says this person should be here, then you go. Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But I think that there is something happening with this obligation that everybody should be there that might actually be very stifling to real things happening. Mm-hmm. I even think of those Tuesday nights at the feasts where like it happened naturally because there was no expectation for you to like be sitting in the living room or like listening to certain conversations. You know, some people were playing volleyball, some people were doing other things, right? But just very naturally, like groups formed. You know what I mean? And I think because, you know, certain people were having an ear for that during that time. And I think that letting Wednesdays be something like that, where it is a set aside time to listen, not necessarily to, you know, try to force something, and definitely not to like just fill Wednesday and make it another day, but literally just a time to have your ears open for if the Lord is trying to do something, you know, and if that happens to include you, that's great. But simultaneously, I think an issue that, and I think the biggest thing that many of us might be afraid of with doing this is the feeling of personal attack if you are not included in that. And I'm not saying that for any individual. I just know that as a people, we are still immature in some different ways. And I can see a world in which somebody takes it personal that they were or were not included in a certain thing. And I just think that this is so far beyond that is another big, like, it's something that is definitely worth addressing, but then maturing past. Because I think that is a very baby hurdle that might be preventing something that the Lord is trying to move us into. But I would love to hear y'all's thoughts.
I even remember sometimes just speaking of how things naturally come about and from a place within that's genuine. And that's like, even when you were mentioning when we kind of split up on Tuesday nights in the feast, like me and Benji were sitting in the room when you guys were praying. We both kind of just got up at the same time and walked out because we had that same kind of conviction that it wasn't really our place to be there. Like there was nothing wrong with us being there, but we didn't have anything to offer. And
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, yeah, but and even in that, we sat down and had a great conversation together about some things going on in our lives. Mm-hmm. And then, you remember that one time, I can't remember if it was me or you or me and Liam in the car, but like, we came here and they were meeting back here. Yeah. Nicole and Mom. And
I remember that.
That was all. I was there as well. I don't think it was I don't know. Oh, Liam was there.
He was.
Yeah, he was
He
there.
was with one of us.
Yeah.
But even a time like that, we didn't just happen to be there. We were obviously supposed to be there, and we were brought in to that time, and that was a pretty heavy time, but it was very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And that just happened. There was no scheduling of that. And there was a conviction within some, and there was an obedience to it.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that happened. So
I remember, I don't want to interrupt, but I just remember something that Nicole said that night, very specifically, that the Lord was kind of highlighting to her about that time. You know, because we had all gotten food,
Mm.
and we had food with us. We brought it and we were going to eat, and then we went to meet, because, you know, we were called that way.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the food was cold when we got back, because that wasn't our priority.
Mm-hmm.
But something that she was saying is that there is a kind of readiness and willingness that we always need to carry with us, you know, that sets aside everything when there is something that the Lord is calling us to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't have to even be Wednesdays, I think, but
I don't
we always
disagree.
need to be, you know, listening to the Lord's Spirit and be willing to drop everything else in order to, you know, sow ourselves into what He's doing.
Mm-hmm. The
in that
reason
time.
I mention Wednesdays though is I don't disagree
No,
with
no,
what
no,
you're
yeah.
saying at all, but I
You-
think that even just having a day, not limiting it to, because that's I think the thing that our brains always want to do, right? We set something aside and then we limit it only to that thing. Oh, we can only have this happen on Wednesday. Oh, we can only meet on this day, right? No, but I do think that there is still merit in intentionally setting aside a day to listen, to do that. Having a day not dedicated to, we're always going to meet on Wednesday, but having a day dedicated just to, let's hear what the Lord's trying to do with this. I mostly think that's beneficial just because people work, especially, and Wednesday nights are a day where we all happen to have actual availability if something does arise, right? Because I think it gets a little more complicated with just the businesses and stuff of people dropping what they're doing, because sometimes that isn't always an option.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree at all with what you're saying. I think that would be a lovely thing to do, and I think still setting aside Wednesdays as something for that, not necessarily like not making plans, not like, you know, oh, but I want to do this, and just having that as a day open to the Lord, not necessarily guaranteed, but just open.
Yeah. And I think He really honored that time because obviously our hearts were willing to let go of
I
everything.
think it was funny as well with that time. Nicole was like, "Oh, you guys can eat your food first." I'm like, "No." Yeah, I myself have been trying a lot harder to listen in that way, and unfortunately, it for me often manifests in ways that are very real, and that because of that, I don't pay as much attention to as I should. Like, for instance, with my sickness, my mom was the one who recognized that as potentially being like something worth paying attention to, that I happened to literally feel completely fine the night before and then wake up like that on Wednesday. And I'm not singling myself out because I know there were several others, but just in my own personal experience, I'm really trying to figure out how to listen in that way, because what I think is very interesting with all the Tuesday feast times was I just like happened to be in the room all of those times, and so I feel like I can't give myself credit for like listening to the Lord in that way and then moving based on that. It just, I happen to be there and I happen to get to participate, you know what I mean? And so I'm not super spiritually mature. I just haven't had a lot of I haven't been in the game as long, right? I'm still only a year into this, so I'm not necessarily coming down on myself, but I am honestly most looking forward to this as an ability to train that. I think of the analogy we often use with hearing from the Lord of like, we're sheep in a pasture listening to the shepherd, right? At first, as a sheep, you might not know the shepherd's voice, but you can at the very least see the movement of your fellow sheep and follow them. You know what I mean? But eventually, after long enough of seeing the sheep and hearing the noises, you start to recognize the shepherd's voice too. And so I think that even in trying to do something like this, if we do or do not, I would be excited even to see what that develops in our community as if you even can call it a skill, but I would say very much it is, of learning to listen to the Lord in that way. I think that's actually a great opportunity to train that sense, if you will. And that's honestly what I would see Wednesdays as the most, is trying to hone in on that, on his voice. Because I would actually say I know he does speak to all of us. But I would say very often, either like myself, you ignore it because you think it can't possibly be that, or you're so busy in life that you don't actually take the time to listen, And I would say there are many in this room who are a lot more experienced in hearing from him that way. I know your examples in the past, I'd love to even know what that has looked like for you. I know that's what I'm saying. I think he speaks to us all the same, but I think there is a posture of heart that you carry that is worth sharing, just because I myself would love to know what that looks like for you. For instance, that if we want to go to that last Wednesday, the one I'm talking about, was it just like a quiet posture of heart? Were you feeling like there was something that you should be listening for? You know what I mean? Like I would be very curious to know, and I think, I think that that's something that could and should and can develop in all of us.
It's kind of a hard place to describe,
Mm-hmm.
being able to be led, I guess. I think I've shared this before too in our time, but that night for sure was the main shift that I was able to see, was that I went from doubting myself or not even knowing why I was there, pretty much just questioning why, to listening, to just listening in and not worrying about the fact that maybe I wasn't worthy, or maybe I didn't know why I was there, or all these things, that are thoughts that could be beneficial, but most of the times are just, games that are not worth playing, in the mind.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. But, I just, remember being very, I think the Lord looks for those people that are just wanting it with nothing else than just wanting it, and wanting or willing to let go pretty much of everything else, and I didn't have like thoughts that I knew I was going to share, but I knew that the Lord could work through me, because He's able to do that, and I still don't remember a lot of the things that I said or even felt, but I do. Those times are very weird and very I guess embarrassing to the flesh.
Scary. Yeah.
As well. I feel very exposed and humiliated in many ways. But that was also kind of my heart toward that time, was that I really not only realized the weight, I guess, of that moment. There was, I think Tim was sharing a little bit about the choice that we have, and that time in his life when the Lord came upon him so strong and there was nothing else. And he knew that there was a choice there to be made. And that was kind of my heart, was that is there a reason why I'm feeling like there's literally nothing else but a choice right now, to give myself to that. And so yeah, I don't know what
No,
else to describe.
I think that was perfect, and the heart posture you were describing of the moments leading up to that is exactly what I was trying to express. I think should be all of our heart postures towards I'm saying Wednesday because I think that's the day we have, but like any particular day of just setting that aside, right? Which again, I think that it shouldn't be limited to Wednesday, but I do think that Wednesday being that a very intentional time of setting that aside, and not even necessarily, and I love what you were saying there, not necessarily what is the Lord trying to do with me, what is the Lord trying to speak to me, does the Lord want me to do something today, but just what is he doing within us as a people. And I think as well, thinking about things that way, it's so much less likely for people to to feel left out or like they're doing something wrong, if they happen to not be included at a particular time.
Yeah. I know you have some good thoughts.
What I do?
Okay.
I mean, we have felt it for a while, just in the very even practical things of just the feeling that you feel when you're there in that time. And it's been on, I mean, I know Noah's heart and my mom's heart and many others for a long time that this, for at least a couple of months, that this time has served its purpose and that it has been what the Lord has ordained for a season, but that it is becoming religious in a lot of ways. It is becoming routine. And it's not bad per se, but we need to move on and we need to move to something better. And I think that this season of change we're in is very unsettling, and I can see that unsettlement even in people like Tim in that time. I don't know if I know he knows that change is needed, but there's still a little bit of holding on in certain areas in everyone in certain ways.
But I even think maybe that's our place as young people. I mean, the adults talk all the time about how there's something specific that we have to be the ones to initiate in this new season. And I'm not limiting it to that or saying even is that, but maybe it's something to consider. Maybe this is a area where we have to be the ones to take initiative. Because I absolutely agree with what you were saying. I think that many of our elders are very aware of this, but I think similar to all of us feel stuck. Is it the right thing to just, say, okay, well, we're just not meeting on Wednesdays anymore, right? Probably not, but, is it the right thing to throw out or to just keep going through the same time, the same motions, the same dead things? I wouldn't say so. And I don't know, I think it might be something worth each of us considering, that this might be an area where we lead that change. But I'm very encouraged to hear you say that. I'm still learning what it exactly means, but I would say with a certain degree of accuracy, feel how a lot of people are feeling, and there's just a weight that certain people carry, especially in Wednesdays, that always made me feel yuck. And at first, I didn't really know what it was. I just knew I don't like Wednesdays because every time we go into Wednesdays, I don't feel good. And I'm now starting to realize I think it's a greater thing that I think many of us are sensing. I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over, but I'm very encouraged to see that this seems to be something we're pretty united in.
It is definitely a time to slow the mind and to really slow down and consider our position as a people and your personal position before the Lord, and to even the encouragement Tim had to really keep each other in prayer and to keep this new season and new way in our generation in prayer. But I think it has there's a pretty big importance to what Tim shared a couple weeks ago in the Analects time, even just with there has to be a forgetting of or a letting go of what we know, or even of previous seasons and what has worked, or not worked, but what has been ordained. And that is going to be required. I think that there's a way of thinking about certain things that we've come to the end of the rope on. It can no longer continue on in this new season. That there is a real need to let go of that way of thinking. And I've felt that resistance or that pull for a while now, of that even in myself and my personal journey and walk with the Lord, that is a hindrance to me, is the way that I'm thinking about things. And I know that's not just me. And so I'd say keep that in prayer too, of how the Lord is going to do that and our willingness to allow him to.
That's exactly what's taking place, actually. I had a dream the night before last of it was an encouraging dream, but I woke up from it feeling very strange. So it wasn't like a happy dream, but it was still a good dream. I was in my cabin, sitting on my stairs, as I often would when I called Emmanuel, when we would call weekly, and I was actually on the phone with Emmanuel in the dream. And he was just like wanting an update, basically. And so I was sharing different things with him. I don't actually remember what I shared except for the last thing, which was something that I was putting into practice that he had taught me. That was kind of the gist, I think, of our conversation, was like I was relaying to him the things that he had discipled me in and the progress that I've made in them, but that wasn't separate in some way or in any way from what was taking place in the community. So it wasn't just like me updating him with my own life, but
The communities.
yeah. What I shared with him the last part of our conversation was I recalled a time, and this actually did happen, where he actually got a little bit upset with me because of a way that I was thinking about how I went about learning things. And I think it was actually during the time I was trying to figure out what classes I would take in Running Start, or if I would even take any at all. So there was a period of time where we were deliberating that, and I had this attitude of, well, I don't want to learn or engage in anything that's not going to be useful to me. That I'm not going to like do something with. That's not going to be practically applicable in my life. And that was the point of contention for me. He did not like that way of thinking. But he still took it as an opportunity to kind of expose in me actually a very shallow and unwise way of going about how knowledge is acquired. But not just pointing out the flaw in my thinking, but also opening up to me a new way of approaching learning. And it sounded almost like it was learning for learning's sake. But it wasn't necessarily that either. It was a way to learn. It was a way to learn a higher knowledge and wisdom through whatever subject it is you're engaging in.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much along the lines of one of those 3 principles of how to learn, which is when you learn one thing, you can learn 3 other things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of you guys recall that from
Mm-hmm.
past lessons, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not just like a little helpful learning method. That actually it carries with it a very profound and substantial wisdom of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way that a son learns things. And anyways, in the dream, I brought this back to him saying, remember when you taught me this? Well, I'm doing it now. This is something I've really come to understand in a much more meaningful way. And the weird part of the dream was after I said that, over the phone, he just like got ecstatic. He started going crazy. Like he, not really acting the way he ever did in real life, but he just kind of went mad actually. And the scene in the dream shifted to where I actually saw, even during the phone call, he was actually on our property, like up near where the laundry room is. And the details of the dream fade from this point, but people were starting to actually express doubt towards Emmanuel as a person because of the way he was starting to act. And I never really saw or heard who those people were, but there was a lack of trust and credibility towards Emmanuel following this incident, because again, it really did seem as if he went mad. He just, like, not in a violent way, not in a harmful way, just like in the word
Mm-hmm.
that comes to me is just ecstatic. He was he just kind of lost it. So there are several things about the dream that are encouraging, but the one that stands out to me in light of our discussion and some obvious things that the Lord is doing is there is an old way, a useless way, and I think a progressively harmful way of thinking that we're having to move past, so that we can enter into the new things that are completely invisible to a mind that clings to old mindsets, old passages of thinking, old strongholds that need to be dismantled and that need to dissolve. And it is absolutely going to play out in the same sphere of activity, spiritually and communally, as it concerns some new things that are going to be taught, even involving the culture study.
Are you referring to the Chinese culture study?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just taking a closer look at what it was that was actually opened up when Emmanuel was discussing a different and a new way of learning things. We're always thinking about the end result. Like what is in this for the good of not even maybe just myself, but anyone else who involves themselves in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the use?
Mm-hmm.
what's the practical
Mm-hmm.
application and substance of anything that we're doing or learning together here? That way, as wise as it seems and may even be in certain circumstances, is the very thing that clouds our vision as to the value.
It's the way man goes about everything. Cause
Yeah.
and effect.
Right. The value of what we're actually learning, what's being imparted to us, what's being opened up in the heavenlies for us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the real end result of that of engaging in such things in such a way is religion ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
because you're ultimately serving man's needs, even if those needs, those aspirations even seem to be at a very high and noble place.
Mm-hmm.
There's from the very beginning, at the very outset of it, I think what you could, exaggerating maybe a little bit, you could call a very utilitarian way of going about spiritual truth. So this has to serve some purpose that I'm able to see clearly and then justify as being something worthy of engaging in, because it's going to do this thing that I can very clearly and tangibly make out as what will be the end result. And that's not walking in faith at all. That's not, even as Paul would say, how do you hope for the things that you already have, or that you can already see, if you will. But that doesn't mean we don't want to see the fruit of the wisdom that we're carrying and practicing either. Obviously, wisdom, as it's also said, is proven by, or proved, whichever, is by her children, by her fruits. And I actually just remembered, I forgot the most encouraging part of the dream. I don't know how I missed this until now. But during Emmanuel's ecstasy, the one thing I heard him actually say was, like, he was like, yes, and he's going to bear my children, which is a really strange thing to say.
I know exactly what that
Yeah.
means, though. That's funny.
But, like, I remember even expressing some sense of, like, confusion and maybe even a little bit of doubt in the dream when he said that. But this is not something I can, at least right now, or I believe any of us can illustrate or detail in a way that would satisfy the mind. But I think it's actually never really going to, and that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
There's, if we're going to teach a new way of learning then we're going to have to learn in that way of learning ourselves. We're going to have to. It seems like a kind of a paradox, but you're not going to be able to learn how to learn in this way until that way of learning has been opened up to you. And ultimately, that's only something that the Spirit of God can do, and that I believe He is doing in this time and season that has that we have now approached.
I'm really encouraged you're saying this. This actually really coincides with a lot of things for me. This first actually started what you're talking about with Wes's finance class for me. That was something that I really struggled with for the reason of your saying of I was thinking about things and what value does this bring? What spiritual importance does finances have, you know? And when he would spend like the whole class like skimming over Bible verses and then going into details about things that I thought matter, right? And I even, I think this was ultimately, that mindset I was carrying was ultimately highlighted in my question about the class that kind of gets joked about, which I think is substantial, which is the why does money matter, right? What I think is incredible about that is it doesn't, right? In terms of all of this, it does not. But phrasing that question in such a way actually highlighted and exposed my mindset operating in the way that you were describing. It was when you had mentioned the honor that you had towards Wes for teaching the class in the first place in our poetry group. It made me step back and analyze what we were even doing in the Culture Center to begin with, and then combined with a lot of the different meetings we've had with our Young Brothers times, talking about man's way of cause and effect. It really made me see that with the way I think about learning. And I am definitely, I don't think I've fully done anything like I figured it out now, right? But I have really been recently thinking about learning not in that very cause and effect way, but as what mindset is the Lord trying to instill with this? And the second I was able to view that finance class in that way, not in the why does any of this matter sort of way, but in what kind of thoughts is this producing in us? You know, what kind of discussions is this generating? What kind of avenues is this opening up, even in terms of conversations, right? And I have really saw some great benefits of seeing that with every class, right? Not walking away from a class with questions and then answers for such questions in this very scholastic way I'm used to operating, but in this very, it's almost like the environment of your mind and how it is changed by certain discussion points. And just with that finance class in particular, that really opened up an area of my mind that needed to be with just some very practical things in my life that I was ignoring because my brain didn't want to deal with them. So anyways, I'm very encouraged to hear you say that, because that has been like a giant thought that just came full circle for me of just a lot of things I saw connecting with, and that's why even now I am very grateful for Wes's finance class, even for just inspiring that thought in me, because I don't think I would have come to that conclusion without thinking this class feels so pointless, and then recognizing why it was wrong to think about that way in the first place. So.
I think that will be, as it was for me, actually, the first way that you will experience and witness effortless action in your own life. So Wu Wei is in how you learn things in this new way. Because I don't know what it. This is gonna sound kind of funny, but I don't know what it feels like to be, or think like a genius. But things open up to you in such a way when you have entered into this new way of learning, where it feels ingenious, but you're not really the one putting things together. They're like being put together before you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe there are things being pieced together in you, but you don't. I'm speaking from my own experience. You don't feel as if you are the one that has put all those puzzle pieces in their proper places, but that it's another hand, it's another work apart from your own intellect that is doing all of it. It's a wonderful feeling, because you're witnessing all of it.
Mm-hmm.
There are new avenues of thinking that begin to open up to you. Again, the subject doesn't matter. The end result, even as far as you're able to discern it, doesn't matter. It's what's taking place in the act of receiving, of thinking, of meditating something. So it's definitely the journey that you're undergoing when you're learning something from the scriptures, when you're learning something in economics, when you're learning how to hone in on your skill of writing, when you're learning how to drive a car. It's like it doesn't. Those new experiences are passages. They're like portals into a new realm that is so much more productive than the mind of men, even more impactful and expressive than the heart of men. But it fills both to the brim, which is why you feel like nothing more than a vessel, like your own mind and heart are a stage upon which these things are performing something that hasn't ever been performed. It's just this really crazy but wonderful process that takes place in all those who begin to walk in this new way of learning. It's not just a lofty colorful experience. It's something that begins to stir the heart of God in the midst of his people and in his body to make known his own thoughts, to make known even the very thoughts and throbs of his own heart. And so it's a new kind. Well, not new in a sense. It's the original way in which God makes himself known in the midst of his people. The true and testifying voice of prophecy, a word of knowledge, a word of wisdom and understanding. These things are not just these mystical, spontaneous incidents or phenomena that take place in really spiritual times, but they become integrated in the way that we think in everything we do in life. So all of a sudden we find ourselves living as spiritual people. And it's strange only in the sense that it's wonderfully strange, not strange in a way that repels us or that goes against what has become our nature as sons. I think we're on the precipice of entering into that. So the things that we searched for and desired with a sincere and true and good desire during times like worship nights are going to be present in everyday life. They're not going to be limited to times. And God bless those times. We'll still have times. But it's time for that to become life. It's time for it to become the air we it's time for it to start to become the air we breathe in everyday life. That's what I'm trying to say. Like we don't need, spiritually speaking, we shouldn't be swimming in a lesser realm so that every once in a while we have to surface and take a deep breath during those spiritual times and then submerge again. We need to leave the lower realm, become a new creature. That's not limited to those breathless depths anymore, you know what I'm saying? Don't be a fish anymore. It's time to be a bird. Emmanuel would use that metaphor often.
Yeah, that reminds me of a time that me and Benji had with Emmanuel where it's actually where we took those he took those photos and posted it on his Instagram.
Oh yeah.
Like our face in the sun. But we were just walking with him through the park, and to me it seemed like a fairly casual time. Like we weren't necessarily talking about anything super deep or meaningful, but we were just sharing in the company of one another. I remember when we got back from the studio, he was like, I think he had said something to him. Now, did that come across to you at all as a casual time? Because it was not. And he went into the interactions that we had with certain people on the hike, just talking about dogs or whatever and certain things, and it revealed to me that a way of thinking that he even had, or he didn't see that time as casual at all. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a check to me. I don't know what you remember from even his sharing after, but that he had that way of living life, mm-hmm. and even of thinking about things is mainly what that revealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think that serves as a great example of how we can have our hearts not only in the more casual times, but even during the, I don't know, what would you call these times? The serious times? I don't know. Intentional times. I think, and there's been many examples of this, but there is a different level, I think, of beauty to myself, and I would assume to the Lord, when our hearts are postured towards Him in the, let's call it spontaneous ways, in the ways where they're not planned or expected. I think that these times are beneficial, but that when your way of life, when in the casual moments, your heart is postured towards Him in the way that it was in that Emmanuel example, and it proliferates in your everyday conversations, I think that not only obviously changes those moments, but I even think it allows these times to not feel so stifling. Because I think, I love this meeting personally. I think it's a little more freeing than things like Wednesdays, but I think we would be fools not to acknowledge that even these times can feel a little stifling sometimes. I don't think that I'm alone in feeling that in this room. I think some people are, I shouldn't even say some people, we are all trying to work through that. But I think that in addressing the casual day-to-days, that even moments like this change substantially. And I think that is that has a way of playing into even what Wednesdays look like in the future.
It's the overflow.
Mhm.
that remember that Tim was talking about.
I do, actually. That's a good
Yeah.
point. And so my encouragement to you guys is, I think it would be wise for us young people to, and I'm not saying limit this to Wednesdays, but I do think a first step is helpful. And I think as a way of first step, if each of us could just, this next Wednesday, just set aside some time to intentionally consider our people, yourself within our people, what Wednesdays look like moving forward. And again, you can say you should do that always, and of course, but I do think that can be intimidating. And so I would say, just as a matter of practice, I would encourage all of us to this Wednesday just set aside some time for specifically that, and just see where it leads. I think that having that as a means of practice might lead to some beneficial things down the road.
Niles, why don't you pray for us?
Dear Lord, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here today. I thank you for showing me that this is the place where I need to be. And I thank you for confirming all the things that I've been thinking about this week through this time. Amen.
Good.